Hello everyone, this is Duan. In today's video, we're going to look at what is a service worker. So we're going to briefly talk about what defines a service worker and how is service worker used in applications. And in the end, we're going to also look at what are some of the core concepts of this service worker. So let's get started. So what is a service worker? By definition, the service worker is a programmable proxy that is promise-based, event-driven, and is situated in between web applications, browser, and networks. So what does that mean? You can think of a service worker, to simply put it, a single script file within your app. And this script file contains a lot of event listeners that listen to events. Specifically, those events are event interactions between your app and your browser and networks. And based on what event it is, it will process or enhance or modify it using the promise. It also runs asynchronously in the background within its own context. So this context is different from the browser context where you have access to the window. And it has a different context. And because it runs in the background, it doesn't need to have your web app open. It doesn't need to have your web app running. It also works when your web app is closed. So commonly, it used to provide special handling of request behaviors, store offline content, caching, and doing some push messaging. It's able to do all these things because usually it's implemented with the fetch and caching API. And also, the service worker, for security reasons, in production, it's only allowed in the secure origins, so HTTPS. It also works in the local host for testing purposes. Okay, so let's talk about what are some of the use cases of service workers. The service worker is very essential for progressive web apps. One thing the progressive web app is trying to do is to improve the request performance regardless of the network condition. So the service worker allows you to do this because it's able to do something like pre-cache assets during installation and fallback caching for API when offline. The other thing that is quite well known for progressive web app is that it can make web application work like native application. So in native app, you often receive updates to your application, and then you can also receive notifications from your application to the operating system. With the service worker, you can use the channel messaging API and notification API to implement features such as these. The other very important feature of service worker is the background synchronization. So imagine if you're in the subway or places where your network condition is poor. When you send your email, those data might be lost. But with the service worker, it can defer actions until the network connectivity becomes stable. So once your device is online, then the email sending event is completed. Let's talk about some of the core concepts of service workers. So the lifecycle and events. The lifecycle composed of several steps for service workers. Those are very important to understand because it helps you to build a good service worker. So the first step is the registration. The registration step is basically allows your system to locate where the service worker script file is and start installation. So the registration will run once every new or updated service worker needs to be registered. So if you have a service worker that is the same as before, it will only register once. During the registration step, you can also specify the scope of your service worker. And you can specify the directory for service worker to handle interception to some of the files, or you can just leave it blank and by default, it will use the location where your service worker file is. So for example, if your service worker.js is in the root folder, then the scope is the root folder. The next step is the installation step. This step can be listened by an event listener using the install event. This event triggers after the successful registration. If the installation is successful again, it will directly to activation. In the activation step, which is the last step in this life cycle, the service worker will be activated and it will start working. So this event can be listened by using the activate event. And because when you activate a new service worker, the scope actually won't include any files that is related to the previous service worker. So make sure to also in this step include any cleanup to caching as well as files that are related to the old service workers so you can transition into the new service worker or the updated one. On the left, you can see a picture demonstrating the basic step of registering the service worker, some of the life cycles for this service worker. It checks for if service worker, and once it exists in the navigator, it will register the service worker using the scope sw-test. It will console log lifecycle steps and catch any errors. For basic steps of how you can set up service worker and get started with it, I'm going to link some resources in the description below. Make sure to check it out. And also I'm going to link some resources so you can look at the service worker life cycles in more detail if you're interested, and some of the event you can listen to in your service worker. Okay, so that's a brief introduction to what service worker is, how it works, where it is used, and what are some of the core concepts. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video and would like to see more related content, be sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment below. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.